Good morning, and thank you for coming to today's talk. My name is Brian O'Malley. I'm a biologist with the USGS Great Lakes Science Center based out of Oswego, New York. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the Lake Ontario Preyfish community. And I'd like to acknowledge my co-authors that make up the Lake Ontario Preyfish Working Group from DEC and NDMRF, as well as the vessel and support staff that keep the program going through all the collaborative work we do. So the goals of today's talk are to review the status of Lake Ontario preyfish populations relative to the fish community objectives that revolve around preyfish diversity, status and trends, and maintaining predator-prey balance. And I'm going to specifically talk about summarizing the spring and fall surveys that we do for 2021 and presenting some of the new work we're doing and some of the new plans we have for 2022. If you're interested in finding out more, there's a lot more information that'll be in the reports than what I can cover today. The 2021 Pelagic Preyfish Report can be found on the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission website, and the benthic Preyfish Report will be published on the New York DEC Lake Ontario Unit Report. So before I jump into the survey results, I just want to give a very brief overview of how the surveys have evolved over the year. All these surveys have been going on since 1978, but in more recent years, we've shifted and redesigned them to make them much stronger and robust surveys. In 2012, this is an example of what the alewife survey used to look like. It was a 2-vessels program and only sampled U.S. waters, whereas in 2021, with the help of the Ontario Explorer, we now sample a much larger number of sites and cover most of the entire lake, including Canadian sites. And we had to do this, we had to get rid of something. So we collapsed the rainbow smelt survey that occurred in June and reallocated that effort into the April survey to expand it. We've gotten rid of reporting numbers of fish as a catch per unit effort base to now informing biomass per hectare. And the timing of the report from when the survey was done to when the information is provided to management has substantially decreased. Now, which it used to take about a year, and now the report information is delivered to management months after the survey. So moving into the 2021 survey results from the spring survey, which occurred during the end of March through May, mostly in April, is 248 trawls. The team was not able to get out in 2022 because of COVID limitations, and we still had some limitations that kind of were able to be worked around throughout the survey. You can see on the right is an image from marine traffic showing the Kehoe sampling in Canadian waters and returning back to Olcott. So we were able to still sample all the sites. It just required a little bit more flexibility in terms of what ports we could use. Moving into some of the trends that we see from the survey, these are some of the pelagic preyfish species that are not alewife. I'll jump into alewife next. But we saw this large increase in rainbow smelt biomass. For U.S. waters, it's the second highest value since only to 1998. And it's the highest that we've seen on the whole lake time series, so a lot of rainbow smelt biomass in the survey this year. Not much, three-spine stickleback and emerald shiner are still relatively low, but Cisco, we were seeing an increasing trend in the whole lake series, especially in part because we're now sampling more in the eastern basin where we know that those populations tend to occur. Here's just an image of a shoveler bag where this was a 6 totes of rainbow smelt that the crew on the RV Kehoe sampled off the Niagara River area. It's a record high catch for this species. Okay, now I'll be presenting on alewife, and this is the first graph I'm going to show is total biomass and density summed across all age classes. And for alewife, we saw an increase in biomass relative to 2019. And similarly, a large increase in density or the amount of fish per hectare. So what's driving that increase in biomass and density is this large increase in this big 2020 year class that shows up as age 1 fish in the 2021 spring survey. And again, these are record high values for the time series dating back to 1997. Alewife size and age distribution also shows that record year class from 2020. The left side here is the number of alewife in terms of billions, and then on the right is their proportion by weight. And you can really see that there's still the 2016 year class is still pretty prominent. It makes up most of the biomass for some of these older fishes, but that 2020 year class is quite pronounced. Also in 2021, during the spring Preyfish survey, the team used hydroacoustics before and after bottom trawl tows to test some assumptions they had about how many fish were above the bottom trawl and therefore not able to be captured during the trawl tows. And below are just 2 echograms from that survey, where a sort of typical view is sort of what they expected and consistent with their hypothesis that fish were mostly concentrated down near the bottom, but there were occasionally some sites where we saw some targets above the off the bottom and in the water column. But when they looked at the data and analyzed the numbers compared to those caught by the bottom trawl, pelagic densities were about 1,000 times lower above the trawl than within the trawl area, suggesting that the bottom trawl is doing a pretty effective job of sampling most of the preyfish biomass. And they continue to plan to do some of this work in the following years as well. Shifting gears to the benthic preyfish survey, which occurs in October, again with the help of 3 vessels from 3 agencies. We completed a record number of trawl tows this year for the survey, 195 tows, and including adding some new sites that are also sampled in the spring, but now we're sampled in the fall for the very first time in Sodus Bay, Little Sodus, and also Bay of Quinte, to expand the diversity of sites that we sampled with this survey. So from the fall time series, we've reported on slimy sculpin biomass since 1978, and we've seen this really substantial decline in their population since that time, and including in the last 10 years or so, since 2011, continue to see the population declining. We did see a slight increase in the lake-wide average relative to 2020, when we only sampled half of the lake. And here's the sort of spatial distribution pattern for slimy sculpin in 2021 during that survey. And the reason why we think we've seen an increase, a slight increase since 2020, is that we know in the eastern half of the lake, we don't really catch a lot of slimy sculpin. They tend to be more in the sites that we sample out in the western half of the lake. And in 2020, because of COVID limitations, we weren't able to get out and sample those sites. So because we were able to get back there in 2021, it really helps us better understand their population status and provide better estimates. And in fact, if you look at it if you split the data into a Canadian versus US type of distribution, you see that the Canadian bars here in black, we have a lot higher biomass densities at shallower depths than you do in US sites. Deepwater sculpin have continued to show this population resurgence since about 2010. Prior to that, they were thought to be mostly extirpated from the lake. And in the last 3 or 4 years or so, we're starting to see the population possibly level out at around 3 kilograms per hectare. And this increase in deepwater sculpin biomass since about 2010 has really had a pretty significant impact on the amount of on the benthic community that's now native. Prior to that, Round Goby was the most important player in terms of biomass in the community, and as you know, it's not native. But now we're starting to see a shift towards a greater representation of native species in that community index. As I mentioned earlier, we started to expand effort into the embayments beginning in 2015 for the benthic and pelagic preyfish surveys. And it's not new necessarily in a sense that these sites were historically surveyed. Actually, there was a long-standing program from 1978 to 2007 called the Yellow Perch Survey that occurred about the first week of October, shown here. These are the survey dates for that program. And since we've started to revisit these at about the same time of the year since 2015, we're now learning that we can combine the two time series and start to draw inference on fish communities for those nearshore habitats as well. So here's just a view of the time series that we've assembled, combining the two surveys, whereas the gap here is the period between when the yellow perch survey had ended, and then beginning in 2015, we're starting the benthic preyfish survey as well. Okay, so looking forward into 2022 work plans for the field season. The Preyfish Working Group has discussed and had several discussions now with LOC about our plans, and both the spring and fall Preyfish surveys are on schedule, and all 3 vessels will be participating once again. We've also had several discussions now on coming up with an experimental trawling program to take place in September, and this will be a nighttime operation that'll probably involve different exploratory methods using bottom and midwater trawling to better get a handle on age 0 salmonidae, inclusive of cragganines and salmonines, especially, and hopefully age 0 alewife as well, and possibly index benthic fish. We're interested in providing information to management on the relative contribution of stocked versus wild age 0 Pacific salmonids. And I'd also want to just point out that in 2021, we had a pretty major milestone where both the crews from the RV Keho and Ontario Explorer were able to use 100% electronic data collection. This is the first time we've ever done this in the program, and we're still working out some of the kinks and improving the methods. But it's a pretty exciting time to be on a boat where all this new technology is around and paper data sheets are kind of a thing of the past. And so that's the end of the presentation I have today, and I've listed the contact information for myself and my collaborators here, and feel free to please reach out to any one of us if you have any further questions. Thank you.